With Kaguribi 13 just over the horizon, looking to be one of the biggest tournaments of all time, with 41 of the top 50 players in the world registered to attend, I thought it would be fun to recount the top 10 biggest tournaments or hardest tournaments to win in the history of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Without further ado, let's just get right into it. At number 10, we are going to have Main Stage 2021. And this tournament was really kind of hyped up to be this brand new big tournament series, almost like a Genesis or maybe a Super Smash Con, but it was Main Stage. And this tournament had 830 entrants, which is pretty large, with an $8,300 prize pool, which is also quite large. And the top level talent that was there was pretty insane, with players like MKLeo, T, Chag, who was really good at the time, Spargo, and Tweak, as well as Elegant, who was also super good at the time, all making the top 8. And this tournament just had really fierce levels of competition, where everybody was really fighting so hard because this was kind of looked at the time as one of those premier tier majors that would really go on to have a big historical, outcome based on whoever would win the tournament. And it ended up being MKLeo versus Spargo in the grand finals. And they were both fighting so hard for this tournament that literally it went game 10 last stock. Spargo almost got it, and then MKLeo barely clutched it out and stole it from Spargo at the very end. So, this just goes to show how difficult of a tournament this really was to win. And MKLeo just wasn't going to let anything stop him. But if you were entered in this tournament, it was going to be very difficult for you to win this. That is why it is going to be number 10 on my list. Next up at number 9, we are going to have Genesis 9. And this tournament was so insanely intense and so difficult to win. First of all, because the amount of entrants were so high. It had 1,215 entrants and a prize pool of $18,000. So this was not going to be an easy feat to win. And with players going on insane breakout runs like Mudace, there was really going to be no easy route to winning this tournament. Even previous Genesis winners like Mars got only 9th place, even after hitting his insane clips on Dabuz, Like, they weren't going to give this one to you easy. And you even would have very top level talent, like top 5 at the time players, like Tweak and Akola only getting 7th, barely making top 8 at the tournament. It was such a high stakes and emotional tournament. Moments like Riddles raging and smashing his controller really go to show that, because people just wanted to prove that they were the best. And somehow MKLeo was able to win another Genesis that year, and he was able to take it from Mudace, who was going on the run of his life at the time. So that's why this is going to be number 9 on my list. This tournament was, I couldn't even imagine how intense it must have felt. Now at number 8, we are going to have the Smash World Tour. And this tournament was so hard for a myriad of reasons. One being the fact that you had to qualify. You couldn't even just enter this tournament. You had to do well at a number of tournaments before this tournament to even be able to get here. Every player that was in the tournament had qualified at a previous tournament, because this was all part of a circuit that was put on through VGBC. And unless you had done well at the tournaments that led up to this, you couldn't even be in the Smash World Tour finale. And so every single player there was already insane at the game, because these tournaments would be hosted all around the world, thus the name Smash World Tour. But then even once you got here, it wasn't smooth sailing from there, because you would have to play not just, legacy players who have always been amazing at the game, but also breakout stars like Zomba, who were people nobody even really knew before this, and they were just doing crazy at the tournament. Speaking of which, Zomba literally ran through pretty much all of Japan's top talent, beating Ken, Shuton, and T all at that one tournament, which is just wild because people, again, didn't even know who Zomba was. He defeated Cola as well, who Cola was really insane at this time. And it's just like, nobody even knew who, Zalbo even was. You obviously cannot talk about this tournament without mentioning Cosmos and his psychotic run through the best players in the world, including Spargo, being able to literally first lose to him in winner's side, but he was able to eventually get it back after suffering a terrible loss to Spargo. I mean, just getting beat down so bad.
Big. Still on cloud, still on stage. Oh, Spargo. I never see. That's when Spargo is like, there's no way I should be losing this. You can tell me. Because it's not too often he makes a face like that.
Oh, my goodness.
Damn, yeah, he can.
Oh, my God. I would say he's rather pissed off.
Yeah,
I would say he's a little
You're
pissed
looking a little
off.
ornery right now.
Quite annoyed right now. You know what I mean? Like, he's like, you know what?
Oh, wait a
Let me show you
minute.
what's
Oh, no way. Oh, he's pissed.
Yeah.
This is looking terrible for Cosmos. I mean, hopefully this is not one of those games you kind of just give up. You're like, all right, man, it happened. I move forward. Otherwise, this is a momentum rattler. And, well, if Spargo can keep this momentum up, we are definitely out of here with Spargo win. Wow. Jesus.
He beat Spargo like one game, and the Spargo rolled his eyes and just did the most brutal beatdown I've ever seen in my life. Like, if you didn't get morally, mentally brain broken after that, I don't know what you are. Like, I don't know how Cosmos was able to take that loss on the chin and then rematch him and beat him. Like, anybody else, their mental is just done for. Because, I mean, that's gotta hurt to just be beaten in front of everybody. But he didn't take it too much to heart, and he kept fighting, and he made it all the way to grand finals and almost beat MK Leo in one game 5, but Leo just activated his plot armor, he locked in, and it was over at that point. But to be able to win a tournament like this had to have been so difficult, it's insane, and only really the GOAT could have done it. I think the prize pool also cannot go without being mentioned, with it literally being one of the biggest prize pools in the history of Smash Ultimate, being $75,000 prize pool, which is just absurd. This is why obviously the stakes were going to be so high at this tournament, and it was going to be so difficult to win. With 1,024 entrants, Kagaribi 10 is going to be number 7 on the list. And this tournament was by far the most international tournament Japan has ever had, with players from Europe, Mexico, United States, and Canada all in attendance, as well as obviously Japanese top players, making this tournament so stacked. And it had such a diverse top 16 for a Japanese tournament. You would literally see a tournament with a bracket like this at something like Super Smash Con. But no, this was in the heart of Tokyo. Something important to note, I think, about this tournament is the fact that there were so many Game 5s. I don't think I've ever seen a tournament with this many Game 5s before. Literally, in top 16, there were more Game 5s than not Game 5s. Pretty much every single set went to a tiebreaker round, which is really crazy when you think about it. Some of the most notable Game 5s, in my opinion, are sets like Riddles versus Dabuz, where Riddles had actually been Dabuz's bracket demon for a while at this point, and he had gone up 2-0 versus Dabuz, so it was looking pretty much over for Dabuz. But then Dabuz took a game, then the next game, he went down 3 stocks to 1 and reverse 3-stocked him, and then he won Game 5, meaning it was a reverse 3-0. And it was so hyped. Dabuz did this crazy pop-off. And it's just like, man, that was so intense. And that didn't even win in the tournament. And it's crazy, too, because you know this was a hard tournament. Because these two players from North America were fighting. And it was at a Japanese tournament. Like, these guys weren't even getting to fight the Japanese players yet, And you also have to think about sets like that of Zachary versus Hero. And Hero's Bowser really had Zachary on the ropes at certain parts of it, and it went to a super nail-biter last hit scenario. And then Zachary got this crazy up tilt into the up air after having gotten kill screened himself, and then he brought it back, boom, wins it, pops off. It was so hype, it was amazing to watch. And then another Game 5 was that of Yoshidora versus Akala, where Yoshidora literally gets Akala way off the screen, gets him with the egg, off screen, kill screens, doesn't kill, then gets him with another egg off screen, kill screens, and it does kill, and he wins. but he didn't even win the set. He would go on to lose later games. So it's like, bro, you gotta fight so hard and you're not even winning, bro. All of this would culminate in Spargo, who had lost to Yara earlier in the tournament, very early on in the tournament, going through losers, making one of the craziest losers runs in the history of the game, going all the way to grand finals and defeating Aquila, literally making him switch off of his best characters just because he didn't even know what to do against Spargo. And this just shows, like, the people were fighting so crazy at this tournament, and it was for no money because they don't even have prize pools at Japanese tournaments. So you would think it wouldn't be such a hard tournament, but it was. It was one of the hardest tournaments of all time. Alright, now next up we have EVO. And EVO, just in general for any fighting game, is pretty much always going to be their biggest and most intense tournament because it's EVO. That's just what it is. You know, it's the peak of fighting game tournaments. And for Smash Ultimate, it was really no different. It is a massive, massive, massive tournament. It had a $35,000 prize pool with 3,554 entrants. And the fact that it had so many entrants actually meant that it was literally, and still is, the biggest tournament in the history of Smash Ultimate in terms of entrants. But not just that, it also had the most top players out of any tournament in attendance, with 38 of the top 50 ranked players all in attendance at this tournament. So to call this tournament stacked is really an understatement. If you just go on to look at this tournament's bracket with players like Gluto, Tweak, Mars, I mean, pretty much every top player that was around at the time doing insanely well and fighting for their lives. Even players like MKLeo, who was literally undeniably the best in the world this time, getting upset in top 64 to Kamehameha's Mega Man and having to make the longest losers run in the history of the game to make it 2 grand finals against Tweak and whoop him brutally many games in a row. And this just goes to show, like, I mean, I don't know how you would even enter this tournament with the mindset of, I'm gonna win, because this was really one of the hardest tournaments you could ever enter. Next up, we have a slightly smaller tournament, but really a more difficult tournament, being Frostbite 2020. And this tournament had a $13,000 prize pool with 1,300 entrants. And you gotta think about it like this. This tournament was so hard, MKLeo, the best player in the world, the guy who won that EVO tournament I was just telling you about, literally got 3-0'd in top 64 by a random kid who was like 15 at the time named Prodigy. And that, I mean, if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what does. Literally, it blew Prodigy's dad's mind, who was sitting there watching from the crowd. I mean, this tournament was so crazy because you have to think about it like this. Since MKLeo got sent to losers so early, he literally had to do, tied with the longest losers run of all time with the past tournament I just told you about, EVO, to make it all the way to grand finals. So either you think of it from Leo's point of view, where you have to lose and then go up against the greatest players in the game's history, like Zachary, Samsora, Nairo, and Tweak, all just to get to grand finals against your Mexican rival, Meister, and somehow try to pull that through. Or you have to think of it from one of those players' points of view, where now you just lost pretty early and you have a raging MKLeo in your path that just seems unstoppable. This tournament was so hard, I don't know how anybody could win it, and really only Prime MKLeo could have done it. Next up, at number 4, we are going to have Double Down, which really, all things considered, didn't have that many entrants with just under 1,000, but it did have a $15,000 prize pool, which is pretty good, all things considered. But even more crazy than that, really, is the actual bracket, with players like MKLeo, Proto Banham, T, Cola, Light, Tweak, Cosmos, and many other top reps like Sonics, Ken, Shuton, and Mars all in attendance. So this tournament was by no means going to be easy for anybody, and everybody was really playing out of their mind. Japanese talent like Shuton, Ken, and Proto, as well as T, all dominated in this tournament, really showing how much power Japan had to offer. Dabuz actually had to make one of the craziest losers runs in history, tying MKLeo's record for the longest losers run ever made, due to the fact that he was upset in top 128 by a Bayonetta player named Frog, who was a local to the Las Vegas region, and he had to beat players like Sonic, Ken, Shuton, and make it all the way to T, where he would go on to eventually lose, but make top 4 in the bracket, which is crazy because he was sent into losers in top 128. You know this tournament was hard because even the tournament's winner itself, Proto Banham, would go on to almost get JV4 by MKLeo, when MKLeo was only playing Corrin. Also, MKLeo would lose and almost get eliminated by T on multiple different occasions in the tournament because they played 2 sets against each other. Nobody was going easy on each other on this tournament, with even sets like Cosmos versus Cola, where these two are actually pretty close friends, but then, you know, when Cola would get the insane up B to take out Cosmos, he'd start stomping on the stage like a madman, and then flexing his triceps for some reason. And yeah, it was just really the type of tournament that nobody was going to get away with easy, and Proto had to fight for everything to take that one home. Next up, we have the Ludwig Smash Invitational.
Hello all, welcome back to the Ludwig Smash Invitational. So, lamely named. We can say that now, right?
You said what?
Well, it's a weak-ass name.
With a $53,000 prize pool and only 32 people in attendance. Now you might say, bruh, why would only 32 people go if there's that much money on the line? Well, it's because you couldn't go unless you qualified. You see, back in 2022, the Smash Panda Cup that was supposed to be, you know, between Panda and Nintendo, it was like a partnership, got canceled, of course. And the Smash World Tour that year got canceled. So what do? Combine them into one, throw in a big streamer, aka Ludwig in this scenario, to get a lot of eyes on the tournament, and boom, you have a massive prize pool and not that many people in attendance because you only have the people who qualified for both of those events. And this was really a crazy tournament. Going back to what I was just saying, the amount of eyes on the tournament, because this was literally streamed on Ludwig's Twitch channel. So many people were watching this, and Ludwig was at the tournament himself interacting with the players. And so everybody knew that winning this tournament would not just net them so much money, but also so much recognition, and they could pretty much guarantee that they would get a sponsor after this. Players like MKLeo, Dabuz, Mars, Tweak, Light, T, Acola, Cola, I mean pretty much every top player you could ever think of was in attendance at this tournament. You had players like Karama, who was Prodigy back in the day, who, you know, upset MKLeo at Frostbite. He was now all grown up, and now he was tearing through this bracket again. He was going on the run of a lifetime like he did that day, and he was defeating players like T, which was really shocking because T was top 10 rated at this time. And so he almost even went on to beat MKLeo, but MKLeo was way too locked that day. He was really trying to prove to everybody he wasn't washed, and he was still just as great as he used to be. And he would go on to win the entire tournament, taking out Acola, and really proving to the world what he was. And you just gotta think, the fact that even Spargo couldn't beat Karama goes to show, like, this guy was really trying hard. And so the stakes were so high, the matches were so intense, nobody was going easy on each other. You literally had Zachary, who is like a generational talent, get 3-0'd by Cosmos. I guess he was clutch most that day, you know, so...
Yo, we hyped Zachary up too. We hyped the shit out of him. We're like, yo, oh my god, innovator of the game. He's a genius.
Everybody was, you know, sweating out of their minds because this is one of the hardest tournaments of all time. Alright, next up at number 2, we have a 2,400 entrant tournament with $24,000 on the line, and it's going to be Super Smash Con 2022. And this tournament was really, really wild because not just did this random kid nobody knew named Onin arrive to the tournament, defeat MKLeo 3-0, defeat all the top level talent in his path, make it to grand finals against Meister, but he also won the whole tournament, and he did it without dropping a single set with Steve. And this was really the rise of Steve. It all began here this day. The moment people saw MKLeo just get 3-stocked and 3-0'd by this kid, we knew something was up, but it was already too late at that point. To win this tournament was so difficult because you had players like Gluttony, Tweak, MKLeo, Light, and obviously the newcomers like Regalo, who was a Lucas player, who actually, weirdly enough, did the best against Onin of anybody who played him that day. And then, of course, Onin at the tournament, just playing out of his mind, showing people what Steve could do. And you know this tournament was tough because not just did MKLeo get destroyed by Onin, but there's always losers bracket, right? He can obviously make it back to grand finals, but no, he didn't. Gluttony defeated him again while he was in losers bracket.
He gets the walk! Leo is out! Gluto moves on!
And Gluto also went on to defeat players like Light. Like, if you look at how stacked the top 8 was, and everybody was just playing so hard because they really wanted to win. This is SmashCon, for goodness sakes. And it was really a moment that people could go on to prove themselves. So it was really, really, really stacked. And nobody was going to be Onin that day. He was at a different level of the game than everybody else. So that's why it's going to be number 2 on my list. Alright, next up at number 1, we have a tournament that only had 16 people in attendance. That sounds really easy to win, but it's not. It's actually going to be Ultimate Summit 5, which would go on to have an $18,000 prize pool, which, if you haven't noticed, most of these tournaments just have a prize pool that is 10 times the amount of players in attendance because it's just $10 entry fee, and then all the money from the entry fee goes into the prize pool. Not this tournament though, because it's got 16 people and $18,000, which is over $1,000 per person. And I can tell you something, they didn't have to pay that much to enter. So essentially, this tournament was very, 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 very hard because people actually had to really pay to have their favorite player be entered into this tournament. It was really a donation-based thing, and whoever could raise the most money could qualify for the tournament. But there were also certain invited players that were always going to be there who were just the best players in the world. And you know this tournament's difficult because you had MKLeo versus Tweak. It went game 5. MKLeo almost reverse 3-0'd him after switching off of Pyra and Mithra and to Byleth. It went game 5. Tweak had to pull out all the stops. It was probably the most intense set of Smash ever played. He hit him with the banana at the very end, gets the forward tilt, kills him in the most last hit situation that's ever happened in the history of the game. And was that for first place? Was that grand finals? No. Second place? No. Third? No. Fourth? No. Fifth? No. Seventh? Nope. That was for 9th place. The loser of that got 9th place. MKLeo got 9th for losing to Tweak, his rival. That doesn't even make sense. But that's how intense this tournament was. And then Tweak would go on to get 7th place for losing to Akola, the best player in the world. Like, this tournament was insane. Also, Spargo would go on to get 7th place, who was really the best player in North America. He got 7th place because he lost to Proto Banham. You had players like Akola going on to get 4th place because he lost to Cola. And Gluto would go on to get 5th place because, you know, he lost to Akola. You have, you know, even after Cola beat Akola, the best player in the world, and eliminated him, he still went on to lose to Light because Light was just playing out of his mind. And so Light went on to get 2nd because he lost to Proto Banham because Proto is unbeatable. So this tournament had so much top talent, and they were just doing terrible against each other because they were all so good, and everybody wanted it so bad. So this tournament was definitely the hardest tournament to win ever. If you have MKLeo getting 9th, Tweak getting 7th, Akola getting 4th, like, I think it's still one of the worst placements Akola has ever gotten, and really that's quite crazy in itself. But yeah, this tournament was, I mean, if you entered in this tournament, I can tell you something. You're not winning it. You know what I mean? If MKLeo and Tweak and Akola couldn't do it, you're not doing it, buddy. You know, so that's gonna be why I'm gonna put Summit 5 number 1 on my list. What do you guys think the hardest tournament in Smash Ultimate to win is? I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say in the comments down below. And I hope you guys are excited for Kagurabi 13 because I know I surely am. But with that being said, please be sure to like and subscribe. I'm really curious to read your thoughts in the comments below. I do read pretty much every single comment. So yeah, please leave your thoughts below and see ya.
I'm just kidding, man.